All right, welcome everybody. This is going to be a little weird today. Our power just went out in where I live. Apparently, there's a big fire down on A Street that's kind of cut power to a lot of places. So, I am presenting our notes to you today asynchronously if I need to. We're still going to try to hold a Google Meet, and I'm on my hotspot on my phone, and but I'm doing this just in case people don't get it, or if there's lots of people that are out today because you live in one of the affected areas. So we are going to get started with our second part of our French Revolution notes today. So I will get us to our. Hopefully, it's not too slow today, even though I'm on my hotspot here. So if you remember on Wednesday of last week before Thanksgiving break, our quick ride was, what would cause you to revolt or rebel against, your government here in the United States? And we had lots of really good answers, everything from gas prices, going through the roof to, parents losing their job or immigration coming in and deporting, somebody who was legally here. Governments doing what the Nazis did in 1930s and 40s Germany, those types of things. All really great answers. So we talked about France before 1789 and how they're kind of divided up into those three groups: the first estate, the clergy, the nobility, the second estate, and then everybody else was the third estate, right? Let me move my camera here to make sure I'm not in anybody's way. So then we talked about specifically the first estate, really small group of people from the Catholic Church, that they own all this land. They have huge amounts of money that they collect from the citizens of France, and that they get to pay no taxes, right? We got all that from Wednesday. And then continuing on Wednesday, we talked about the second estate, the nobility. These are the people that are related directly to the king and the queen and how they own a bunch of land as well. And they collect a bunch of money from the ownership of this land, and then how these people also don't pay very much in taxes, if anything. These minor nobles pay a little bit, but anybody who's like pretty close to the king and queen or living in the palace in and around there, they're not paying much in taxes either. I'm going to move this over to this side. Apparently, I think it's probably going to be easy. Well, can I make it smaller? It looks like I can make it smaller. No, not much. All right. So, and then we talked about the different people in France from the third estate, right? Part of it is this group of, wealthy businessmen, and then most of the rest of the people, 20 to 23 million of them, this is again somewhere in the neighborhood of 95 to 97% of all the people in France, right? They pay huge amounts of taxes to the government, and they also pay taxes to the king or to the church as well. So two groups that are not paying any in taxes are also getting the most in taxes from the poorest group of people in France. Not the greatest way to run a country, in my mind. You probably want to tax the people with the most money the most, so that you can get the best value for your dollar for the government. So again, we talked a little bit about land ownership, and you see that the smallest groups of people, up here, have the most amount of the land, which land equals wealth at this point. All right, and so then we talked about the different, political and economic causes of, discontent, why people are mad. And so one of the political causes is the stuff that we talked about all last week, these ideas of liberty and equality that are out there in the Declaration of Independence and in the social contract, and in a bunch of different writings in and around John Locke's writings in and around France that people are reading and listening to and hearing about. 13 years before this, the French helped out the Americans and in our Revolutionary War, and then they look at their own life and they're like, what? This is not okay. And again, economic differences, right? This huge difference between the rich people and the poor people in the country, right? The poor people in the country barely can afford bread, and the rich people are having these huge luxurious feasts and having this system where they're worried more about their spending huge amounts of money on their hairdressers and their gardens and all of those types of things, and these people can barely survive, can barely eat. And another one, right? We ended with this one, right? That there's an economic, problem as well. That there's these rising prices on basic goods, on wheat, rye, meat, firewood, those types of things, bread. We're going to talk about that tomorrow when we watch the movie. The rising cost of bread, and then these rising taxes and all of the things that people, need to pay for that cause this anxiety. They don't have enough money. They only get a little bit of wage increase. And so they're increasingly poor, but they're having to pay more for the things that are just the basics in life. So we're going to move on to our last section of notes here. So this is where you're going to start today. So our D here, below the picture in your notes, is a political one, right? That King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette are, they're just terrible rulers. We're going to get some definite concrete details and facts about that when we watch our movie tomorrow. But they don't think about anybody but themselves. And that is a bad characteristic for any leader, right? Any leader needs to be thinking of others before themselves. And all Marie and Louis can do is think about themselves. How big of a party they can throw, how much money they can gamble, how much they can spend on their palace, and how much they can spend on their hairdos and their, again, this picture right here is from the Palace of Versailles that they lived in. This is his personal chapel, right? It's the place where only the king went to worship on Sundays, right? And so this is this only he can go there. Look how expensive it is, and there's people literally outside his gates that can't even afford food, and so they're spending money on things that they don't need to, and they don't really care about anybody but themselves. Essentially, we'll give you some more facts about that when we watch the movie. So here's where we get to the kind of history of this whole thing, right? So Jacques Necker, if you remember him, he's the finance minister for Louis. He's the guy that runs all the money in the country. And he basically urges Louis and says, you need to call a meeting of all of the estates, the clergy, the nobility, and the rest of France. You need to call this group together, basically like a parliament or a congress. And you need to get them to approve some new taxes and some new economic policies. Make it so that our country can survive economically. And the problem with this, I'll move this back up here, is that when this group got together, when this Estates General got together, and they voted on anything, whatever it was, the problem with the voting was, as you see down here, each estate had an equal number of votes. So they're basically, the vote was essentially 1, 1, and 1. I know it says 33% here, but they basically have 33% of the votes, the delegates, the 33% of the say, right? They have 1/3 of the power, basically. And notice that it's only really about 2% of the population. So 4% of the population, if these two estates were to vote together each time, it would be basically 2/3, so two out of 3 every time they voted, because each group, each estate had to vote as a group. They didn't have individual votes. They all had to get together and say, what do we want to do? And the third estate all got together, what do we want to do? First estate all got together, what do we want to do? And when they voted, it was the first estate, what do we want to do? And they say, this is what we're going for. And so if these two estates, all they had to do every time to dominate, remember that the first estate is the clergy, the church. Second estate is the nobility. These people are massively rich. They're a really small percentage of the population. So all this massively rich population, two groups of people had to do is say, let's just vote together every time. And it's 2 against 1 every time. 2 against 1 every time. And so the problem is the third estate recognizes this and says, no, listen, if we're going to get together in this Estates General, we want more votes. We want equal representation. We want, vocab word coming up, hopefully you said it to yourself, popular sovereignty. We want the people, the 96% here, if this were fair and popular sovereignty was the rule, meaning everybody got a vote, 96% of the population would have 96% of the vote. And so this has to be your number one political cause when you write on Friday, because this is the root of all political causes, is that the people, the group of people in France that make up the most amount of people, have the least amount of say. They only have 1/3 of the vote. They only have 33%. They're missing out on about 63% of the vote that they should have is gone. It is given to people right here, this group of 4%, these two estates. It's given to those people so that they can keep power. So that has to be your number one. That has to be your number one political cause. Hopefully everybody kind of understands that, right? You need to say voting is a problem. The voting in the Estates General was the problem. It was the number one political cause. And then you need to explain it. You need to explain here, right? 96% of the population only had 33% of the vote. And what that means is that 4% only have, they get 67, 66.6% of the vote. And they can always outvote the lower class. The rich people always win. They've rigged the system so they always win. Right. And so you get this political cartoon from the time period, right? You get the nobility here, the big fat king, King Louis XVI, fat, ill-bred boy with the whip and the reins, riding, in control of the country. The clergy, the two people up here, the first estate, kind of coming for the ride, right? You can tell it's them because of the cross and the collar and those type of things, right? They're just coming along for the ride, right? They don't have to do any work, right? Notice they're pretty fat too. That means they eat a whole bunch. They have enough money to eat. And who are they riding down here? They're riding the third estate, this group of people that has to do all the work. They don't have any political voice. They're blind, right? They don't have any ability to help run the country. They're in chains, just like Rousseau said in The Social Contract, right? Man is born free, but everywhere he's in chains. So what happens? This Estates General meets, and the third estate says, okay, listen, if we're going to meet again, we want more representation. That's not too much to ask. We want fairly equal representation. We want more votes. We want to have a say in what actually goes on. And we want the first and second estate to pay more in taxes. We want them to pay their fair share. It's not really too much to ask. At the time, it's super radical because it had never been done before. But this is really not that big of a deal to ask for. And so Louis, again, this is a perfect example of his poor leadership. When he finally, after they meet for about 6 weeks and they can't reach a compromise, they can't reach any decision, Louis just goes, we don't need them. The first and second estate have 66% of the vote. We can outvote them every time. We don't need the third estate. And so he physically locks them out. They start a meeting with the first and second estate. They physically lock the doors to the Estates General, to the place where they are meeting. And the third estate's looking around like, wait, what? We got locked out? And at the same time, again, another on the list of bad decisions, Louis moves troops into Paris, his own personal military soldiers, and basically says, we think that there's going to be an uprising. We think that their people are going to be really mad about this decision I just made. Well, how about don't make that dumb decision and you won't have to move soldiers in? No, but he makes both the decisions. He says, we're going to make this really bad decision of locking them out and we're going to move soldiers in. So the people in Paris look around and go, he just locked out the third estate and he's moving troops in. They obviously think that there's some sort of plot to get rid of the third estate, to get rid of this group from the Estates General and get rid of people's voice and go back to this place where the king has all the power again. And so naturally, these people suspect some sort of plot. And they get pretty pissed off about it. They're at the end of their rope, right? They have no money. They can't eat. The price of bread has skyrocketed. Price of any good has skyrocketed. There's nothing to eat. People are fighting, bakers at bakeries and lynching them on the spot because of the prices. And at this point, Louis looks around and goes, yeah, double bird. I don't really care about you guys anymore. And he never did in the first place. But this is kind of the last little straw. So we get to the point where there's revolution, right? So the Third Estate, the people that are meeting in the Estates General, they say, well, screw this. We don't need to meet with the First and Second Estate anyways. We're just going to create our own new government. So they move outside to what's like a tennis court or a handball court or whatever it is. It's some sort of, racket sport type of place. And they go outside and they basically meet for a couple days and say, we're coming up with a new constitution. Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. That doesn't exist anymore. It's a pretty crazy statement to make. And at the same time, Louis makes another bad decision, another on the list of his really bad decision. He then fires Jacques Necker, the only guy that was sympathetic to the people, the Third Estate in France. He fires him in the midst of all of this thing. He basically says, I don't need you anymore. You got me into this mess. And so the people, the Third Estate, the people in Paris look at this and say, wait, the only person who's on our side in the government is now gone? Well, that's the last straw. We got troops in Paris. We got them kicking out the Third Estate. We got the Third Estate making a new constitution. We can't afford bread. This is just a list of things over and over again to these massively poor people in Paris and surrounding areas that basically make them, like I asked you at the very starting of these notes, what would cause you to revolt? And this is the last straw. It's the last point where people go, well, we have no choice anymore. We don't have a government that's representative of us, and it's continually making bad decisions, and it's continually costing us our livelihoods, our children, our future, the food we eat today is affected by these national decisions by this really, really poor decision maker at the top, Louis XVI. So at this point, July 14th, 1789, you get the riots that break out and people storm the prison known as the Bastille, which is odd because there wasn't a lot of prisoners in there, but it was basically being used as an armory. So for a place for weapons and ammunition. And so people had weapons, but they didn't have a lot of ammunition. So they storm the Bastille. They kill the guards. They cut off their heads. They parade them around the ramparts of this prison with their heads on pikes. It's a pretty nasty, brutal scene. And people are literally tearing down this prison brick by brick as a, kind of punishment for the years that they've been mistreated. And Louis is looking around going, whoa, wait, what's going on here? And so you get the kind of start of revolution. But again, we are really concerned about the causes, what got them to this place. And so hopefully you've seen, in the orange and green sections, the political and economic decisions that got them to this place. So let's do a real quick exit ticket at the very end of your notes. There should be a spot. If there's not, just add a little text box right there at the bottom. Just hit add row below, I think. Yeah, right click and hit add row below. But there should be one there. So which of the causes do you find would make you the most angry had you lived during the time period? Again, make sure you write about the why it would make you angry. Is it the talk of liberty and equality that's going on outside of France that gets you to a point where you're realizing that you don't have it? Is it the cost and price of food? Is it the massively high taxes? Is it the massively high taxes added in with the inequality of the people who had the most didn't have to pay taxes and the people who had the least had to pay taxes? Is it the extraordinarily bad decisions of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette? Is it their greed? Is it those two at the top showing just no regard for other people? Is it Louis's bad decisions all the way along the line? Is it locking the third estate out of the estates general and not being willing to compromise? Is it the voting problem? We just went through an election here in our country, and all you can hear about on the news still, is people like Donald Trump and others saying, "Oh, the election wasn't fair." I mean, people are genuinely upset when they believe, again, whether rightly or wrongly. There's no evidence to suggest that that Donald Trump actually won our election, but when they believe that an election isn't fair, when they believe that their votes don't count, people get really upset about that. Is that what would get you to the point where you would be upset? So figure out one of those causes and do a quick 3 to 5 sentences at the very end of your notes to add in as an exit ticket today. So I have no more notes for you. Basically, tomorrow, be ready to come in. We're going to be watching a movie in class, and we're going to be watching a movie over our Google Meet. I will have a recording of the Google Meet and all that stuff tomorrow as well. So hopefully you picked up where you left off on your notes today, and hopefully I don't have to use this, and hopefully we can actually meet in class. But if you didn't, this is a great little alternative for you. Make sure you get all these notes written down in your packet so that you are ready to write on Friday based on these economic and political causes. Have a great day, everybody. I will see you on Wednesday.